Good morning, sir. So my topic is alcohol dependence syndrome. So I'll be presenting the topic.
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
The epidemiology. The worldwide, it has 1.8 billion deaths per year. The lifetime risk for alcohol dependence is approximately 10% for men and 3.5% for women. In India, the prevalence of alcohol is 21.4% given by a NHS study studying the socio-demographic correlation of drug abuse. Alcohol also has a numerous health and social consequences, which is an important contribution for death and disability. Pharmacology. Alcohol is a CNS depressant. It acts with the enhancement of the effects of GABA, which is the inhibitor transmitter on its GABA receptors in brain. Inhibition of glutamate action, excitatory action on the NMDA receptors, leading to disruption in memory, consciousness, and alertness. Alcohol is mostly absorbed in the GI tract. It is mostly 20% is absorbed in the stomach, and the rest is 80% absorbed in the intestine. It is mainly absorbed in the duodenum and jejunum. Peak blood alcohol concentration is reached at 30 to 60 minutes roughly. In stomach, the alcohol is metabolized by the gastric first pass metabolism. Alcohol is metabolized mostly in liver, while little amount of alcohol is also metabolized in the stomach. But the impact of food on alcohol absorption. As you can see in the graph, the impact of alcoholism is more when there was no food intake compared to food intake. Neurobiology of alcohol effects and dependence. Rewarding the sense of alcohol gives a rewarding sense of euphoria, which is described as a high or a buzz. With continuous drinking, it will lead to a tolerance build-up in the individual, which leads to a craving or an irresistible urge to drink. There's also which leads to blackouts and after effects of drinking, like frequent hangovers, which causes psychological problems and medical complications. Melin-by effect. Melin-by effect is a phenomenon in which a person perceives the impairment of the blood alcohol level is higher when it is rising compared to when it is decreasing. As you can see in the graph, the red line is the CNS effect of alcohol, and the blue lines is the blood alcohol level. As you can see, there's a sudden rise in alcohol concentration, alcohol effect on CNS, while there's a steady rise and decrease in blood alcohol level. Now, potential long-term effect of ethanol. The large consumption mainly causes brain impairment. It can lead to Winkel-Korsakoff syndrome, vision changes, ataxia, impaired memory. It can also cause psychological symptoms like craving, irritability, antisocial behavior, depression, anxiety, psychosis, hallucination. It leads to mouth cancer, trachea cancer, and esophagus cancer. It leads to anemia. It causes liver cirrhosis, hepatitis. A lot of heavy drinkers have chronic gastritis. Heavy consumption of alcohol also leads to pancreatitis. Now, diagnostic criteria for the alcohol dependence syndrome. DSM-4. We'll be seeing DSM-4, DSM-5, and ICD-10. According to DSM-4 criteria for alcohol dependence, the person needs 3 out of all the 7 criteria to manifest during the 12-month period. First is tolerance buildup. Second is withdrawal symptoms or clinically defined alcohol withdrawal syndrome. Use in large amounts or for longer period than intended. Persistent use or successful efforts to cut down on alcohol use. Time is spent obtaining alcohol or recovering from effects. Social and occupational and recreational pursuits are given up or reduced because of alcohol use. And use or continue use despite knowledge of the alcohol-related harm. Now we'll be discussing the DSM-5 criteria, in which a person needs to manifest 2 or more of the symptoms in the following symptoms from the following signs. Alcohol is often taken in large amounts or over longer period than it was intended. There's a persistent desire and unsuccessful effort to cut down or control the alcohol use. A great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain, use alcohol and recover from its effect. There is a strong craving and or desire to drink alcohol. There is recurrent alcohol use, which causes a person to fulfill his major obligations like work, school, and home obligations. Continued alcohol use despite having persistent or recurrent social interpersonal problems caused by the effects of alcohol. Important social and occupational activities are given up due to alcohol use. Recurrent alcohol use causes physical harm. Alcohol use continued despite knowledge of having persistent or recurrent physical or psychological problems that is likely to be caused or exaggerated by alcohol. There's a tolerance build-up. Withdrawal symptoms come up in a patient who have stopped drinking. Next is the ICD-10 criteria. So the person should have 3 or more of the following present together for at least 1 month or at least repeatedly during the last year. Most of the pattern that we see is similar in the DSM-4 and DSM-5 criteria. Alcohol subtypes. We'll be discussing Collinger and Jelinek species of alcoholism. Collinger divided types of alcoholism into 2 types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, it's usually has an early onset. It has a late onset. There's an infrequent drinking. There's infrequent fighting between drinks. There is a psychological dependence, and there's a lot of guilt and fear about alcohol dependence in type 1. In type 2, it has an early onset. The person is not able to control his cravings to drink. There's not much psychological dependence and guilt because the person is not mature enough to understand in the type 2. Personality traits. In type 1, there's a novelty seeking is low, harm avoidance is high, and reward dependence is also high. In type 2, novelty seeking is high, but the harm avoidance and reward dependence is low. Now, Jelinek species of alcoholism, he divided into 4 categories: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. So we'll be starting with etiological elements. First is psychological vulnerability. The alpha species have a high psychological vulnerability and low physiological vulnerability. So there's low to moderate socio-culture and economic influences. The nature of dependence in alpha species is psychological. There's a low acquired tolerance, low loss of control, low inability to abstain, and the progression is slight. The physical habits or the nutritional habit of the person is good to poor damage elements. Physical is low to moderate, and socioeconomic is also low to moderate. In beta species, the etiological elements, psychological and physiological vulnerabilities are low. Sociocultural influences and economic influences are low to moderate. Alcohol process elements. Nature of dependence. In beta species, there is no dependence. There's low tolerance, there's low loss of control. The person is able to control amount when he wants to drink or not. He is able to abstain from drinking. The progression is slight and the nutritional habit is poor in the beta species. The physical and mental damage is higher and the socioeconomic is low. In gamma species, the psychological and physiological vulnerabilities are high, but the socio-cultural and economic influences remains the same. It is low to moderate as the other species. Alcohol, nature of dependence is psychological, more psychological than physical in gamma species. There is a high acquired tissue tolerance, high loss of control, low inability to abstain. There is marked progression and poor nutritional and physical habits. The physical or the psychological damage due to alcohol is low to high. The socioeconomic is high. In Delta species, the psychological vulnerability is low, but the physiological vulnerability, socio-cultural influences, and economic influences are very high. Alcohol, the nature of dependence is more physical than psychological. There's acquired tolerance buildup. There is low loss of control and high inability to abstain from drinking. There's a slow progression. The nutritional and physical habits of the person may remain not too harmful to the patient. It's fair enough. He does not harm his body much. The damage is low to physical damage is low to high, and the socio-economic damage is high. Now the lab test for examining the alcohol level in the person's blood. The first we can use is carbo deficient transferrin. This is the most sensitive and specific for heavy drinkers. It has been approved by the FDA. The cutoff value is 20 mg per liter. Carbohydrate deficient transferrin has a short biological life, hence it can be used to check for abstinence in heavy drinkers. Gamma glutamate transferase or GGT. It has a cutoff value of 30 units per liter. It is most commonly used marker for heavy drinkers. Normal levels are reached within 2 weeks of abstinence. Liver function test. There's an elevation of SGOT and SGPT observed in heavy drinkers, but ratio of SGOT and SGPT can be used to distinguish between non-alcoholic liver disease and alcoholic liver disease. As the ratio is greater than 2, it is associated with heavy alcohol consumption. MCV, mean corpuscular volume. MCV is a marker which checks the size of RBC is greater than 91 cubic micrometer. It tends to increase in alcohol. MCV requires 2 to 4 months period of abstinence to normalize. There's an increase in MCV in alcoholic patients because there's a lack of folate. There's a folate deficiency in alcoholics, which causes the increase in size of the RBCs. Alcohol intoxication. The symptoms for alcohol intoxication would be slurred speech, dizziness, incoordination, unsteady gait, nystagmus, impairment of attention or memory, coma, and or double vision. Impairment observed at different levels of alcohol blood concentration. At 20 to 30 mg per deciliter, which is the legal limit in which a person can drive, is within this limit a person can drive. His symptoms are usually decreased thinking ability and slowness of the motor performance. At 30 to 80 mg per deciliter, there's a worsening of the above two symptoms. When the alcohol concentration reaches about 80 to 200 mg per deciliter, there's an emotional liability, incoordination, and there's a lot of judgmental error can occur. When the blood alcohol concentration reaches 200 to 300 mg per deciliter, there's a slurring of speech, nystagmus, and alcoholic blackout. Alcoholic blackout is a type of anterograde amnesia. That is, the anterograde amnesia is when a person cannot make any memories from that point onwards. And if the blood alcohol concentration reaches above 300 or 300, it can result in a coma or death. Screening examination. For screening, we can use CAGE audit, which is the alcohol use disorder identification test. We use SADC to check the level of severity of alcohol dependence. Then we have Michigan alcohol severity test, which is one of the oldest and most accurate alcohol screening tests available. CAGE questionnaire. Have you in CAGE all the questions are used CAGE questionnaire. C. Have you ever felt the need to cut down your drinking? A. Have people annoyed you by criticizing your drinking? G. Have you felt guilty about your drinking? And E. Are you an eye-opener drinker? Who drinks early? Eye-opener is who drinks. The first thing he do is drinks when he wakes up. If the person says yes for 2 or more of these, then there's a alcohol abuse or a alcohol dependence. Withdrawal symptoms. Since the time of last consumption, after 6 to 8 hours, the person may experience tremor, which is most common, nausea, vomiting, sweating, restless, and mydriasis. After 12 to 24 hours, The patient may have alcoholic hallucinosis, in which auditory is most common. After 24 to 48 hours, the patient might start having the alcohol withdrawal seizures. And after 48 to 72 hours, the patient might exhibit delirium tremens. Now, delirium tremens. It has a 20% mortality rate. It occurs in patients, mostly in patients who are in the 30s or 40s after they have been heavy drinking for past 5 to 15 years. The duration of delirium tremens is usually 3 to 10 days. Symptoms include loss, disturbance in consciousness, distortion in time, place, person, hallucinations. In delirium tremens, the hallucination is more visual than tactile. There are also coarse tremors, autonomic hyperactivity, and tachycardia is seen. Management of a patient who is alcohol dependent. The first step would be intervention. We'll have to have intervention. The second is detoxification. Detoxification can be done in two ways. There are fixed dose and variable dose. And there are different medications used for management of the patient. And the third is maintenance of abstinence/rehabilitation. First, detoxification. In detoxification, benzodiazepines are choice of treatment for detoxification. They have a cross tolerance and convulsive property, which can also help in with an alcohol withdrawal seizures. In case of hepatic impairment, it is preferred to use short-acting benzodiazepines like oxazepam or lorazepam. As we had seen in this slide, for maintenance of abstinence, we can use anti-craving agents, aversion agents, or non-pharmacological therapy. So first, anti-craving agents. Baclofen. It is a GABA B antagonist, decreases dopaminergic activity in reward pathway. It has limited hepatic metabolism and so is well tolerated in people who have liver disease. You need to slowly wean off from baclofen to avoid the withdrawal symptoms. Naltrexone. It is a mu-opioid receptor antagonist, decreases dopamine released due to alcohol reward pathway. It is contraindicated if the person is currently using opioid or has a hepatic failure or if the patient is pregnant. Acamprostate. It is a taurine analog. It is a functional NMD antagonist. Is useful to relieve people from the drinking. Its contraindication is renal impairment, severe hepatic impairment, and pregnancy. The deterrent agent would be disulfiram. Its mechanism of action is it stops. It inhibits aldehyde dehydrogenase, which stops the alcohol metabolism of alcohol from ethanol to acetate, which causes symptoms like nausea, vomiting, palpitation, blood vision, and dyspnea. Disulfiram should only be given after the patient has been abstaining for at least 24 hours. Mild alcohol disulfiram reaction would be facial flushing, sweating, nausea, hyperventilation. Severe would be acute heart failure, myocardial infarction, arrhythmias. Contraindication, cardiac failure, coronary artery disease, hypertension. Non-pharmacological relapse prevention. We can use motivational enhancement, encouraging the patient to explore their drinking and the impact it has on their life to encourage self-change. Cognitive behavior therapy. This approach focuses on patients' thought and feelings and help them to identify and cope with their triggers. The person can join alcohol anonymous groups, which is a self-help groups run by the people who themselves are alcohol or used to have alcohol dependence, but are now they all support each other and help each other in recovery. Alcohol-induced disorders. We will be discussing Wernicke's encephalopathy and Korsakoff syndrome. Wernicke's encephalopathy. It is acute complication caused by a thiamine deficiency. Symptoms include confusion, ophthalmoplegia, and ataxia. It is a completely reversible with treatment. Korsakoff syndrome. It is a chronic complication. It is also caused by thiamine deficiency. Symptoms include amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is more common than retrograde, and confabrications. Confabrication says the patient tends to make honest lies because he cannot remember what had happened. And only 20% recover from this. The neurological lesions seen is same in both the cases. The lesions are symmetrical, paraventricular, involving mammillary bodies, thalamus, hypothalamus, midbrain, pons, medulla, the fornix, and cerebellum. The treatment is to administer thiamine at least 300 mg orally or 100 mg intramuscular for 4 to 5 days. Some countries use high potency B complex or Pabrinex, which contains 250 grams of thiamine. We can also administer thiamine via IV in 100 ml normal saline over 30 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can we go to the next presentation?
Yes, sir. A very good morning to each and everyone. The topic that I'm going to present today is eating disorder, moderated by Dr. Veena. So what is an eating disorder? Eating disorder, these are basically a mental illness that can cause serious disturbance in person's everyday diet, and also it can be associated with distressing thoughts and emotion. There can be very serious condition which can affect the patient, which can affect the individual physical, psychological, and social function life. The type of eating disorder that I'll be discussing today is anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, avoiding restricted food intake disorder, pica, and rumination disorder, which is also a feeding and eating disorder. The onset of anorexia nervosa is during the early adolescent. For bulimia nervosa is during the late adolescent, and in the young adult is the binge eating. So among these three, the most common onset is the binge eating, and the most dangerous is the anorexia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa, they are characterized by three criteria. The first criteria is when the individual is obsessed in becoming very thin by self-starvation, and this can lead to a very extreme weight loss for the individual height and age. So in a normal BMI, the normal adult BMI is around 18.5 to 24.9, but in patient with anorexia nervosa, their BMI is under 18.5. The second criteria is when the person only eat a small amount of food, such as the low caloric food, or also exercise excessively, or maybe the individual will have a distorted body image. So when he or she look herself in the mirror, he or she may see herself as fat, even though the patient is extremely thin, and also they have a fear of gaining weight. The third criteria is when there's a presence of medical sign and symptom which can result from starvation. There are two subtypes. Restricting type is when the individual achieved the weight loss by dieting, fasting, or excessive exercise. And the second subtype is binging or eating, or bridging eating or purging type. That is when the person binge eat or subsequent behavior of purging behavior, that is self-induced vomiting or usage of laxative or diuretics. The most common age of onset is between 13 to 19 years of age. More females are affected more than male, with 5 to 1% of adolescent girls, and it is mostly predominant in Western or industrialized countries. Greatest frequencies among the young women in profession who requires to be slim or thin, such as modeling and ballets. The depression has the highest comorbidities with 65%, social phobia with 34%, and OCD with 26%. There are many biopsychosocial in anorexia nervosa. In biological, the genetic factors accounts for more than half of the 50%, especially the first degree relative, which has the greatest lifetime risk. And irregular hormone function is in women, the estrogen level decreases, and which can lead to amenorrhea. And in individuals with anorexia, the people, they starve themselves. So the starvation could lower the thyroid function, which could lead to hypothyroidism. And behavior impulsivity is when it's associated with loss of control over eating, which is also a subtype of anorexia nervosa. In social or environmental, society emphasis on thinness and exercise. There can be higher social anxiety, family interaction pattern, and psychological distorted body image, poor insight, perfectionism, which can lead to OCD. preoccupation or obsessive thoughts about food and weight. The clinical feature of anorexia is the individual who have an intense fear of weight gain. There can be body image disturbance, increased exercise, or binges usually occur secretly, which are often are frequently followed by self-induced vomiting. There's some signs, symptoms, and complications. So due to delayed gastric emptying, it can lead to constipation and bloating, and primary or secondary amenorrhea. And one of the most clinical complication could be the Lenigo hair. So whenever these Lenigo hair are present, it is a sign that the anorexia has progressed to a very dangerous level. We can also see bradycardia, hypotension, arrhythmia, and osteoporosis due to malnourishment. The management for anorexia could be the nutritional rehabilitation, hospitalization, cognitive behavior therapy, family therapy, and drugs such as antipsychotic drugs such as olanzapine, antidepressant as fluoxetine. Now moving to bulimia nervosa. In bulimia nervosa, they are characterized by frequent recurrent episode of binge eating, a large amount of food in a small period of time, associated with loss of control over eating. They eat beyond fullness and also feel guilty after eating. So the characteristic feature of bulimia nervosa is that they have a compensative behavior. That is, they self-induce vomiting, or they purge the food from the body after eating, or it can even be misuse of laxative or enemies or excessive exercise to prevent weight gain. But in bulimia nervosa, the individual is not significantly underweight. It can either be normal or slightly high BMI. Some signs and complication of bulimia is that one of the most common is a Russell sign. So this Russell sign happens when there is a repeated contact of the finger with the teeth during the self-induced vomiting, where there can be abrasion, a small laceration, and calluses on the back of the hand over the knuckles. Parotid gland enlargement can also happen due to induced vomiting multiple times a day, and they're also forced to produce excessive amount of saliva, which can cause their parotid gland, salivary glands to become overstimulated. Mallory-Weiss syndrome can also be seen, where there can be due to severe and prolonged vomiting, which can result in tearing the line of the esophagus. Management could be cognitive behavior therapy as selective serotonin uptake inhibitor drug class such as fluoxetine, and also through group therapy and family therapy can be done. Binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder, this is due to a repeated episode of binge eating. Binge eating is also similar to bulimia, but then one thing that differs from bulimia is that in binge eating, there is no compensatory behavior such as self-induced vomiting, purging behavior, or misuse of laxative. So usually the individual with binge eating, they can be overweight, and also it can lead to obesity. And the binge eating prevalence is much greater as if you compare it to anorexia and bulimia nervosa. And the binge eating, the individual, they're very distressed, or also they can be accompanied by negative such as guilt or disgust. The treatment goals for binge is similar to bulimia nervosa, though the role of drug treatment in binge eating is not so clear yet. Avoiding restrictive food intake disorder. So this disorder is characterized by intake of insufficient quantity or variety of food where the person is not able to meet the adequate energy or nutritional requirement. So many children, they go through these phases, they can be very eaty or picky, or they can be very selective while eating. So this person, the children does not consume enough calories to grow, and their body is not able to develop properly. And also in adults, they're not able to maintain the basic body function. But in this disorder, they are not concerned about their body weight or the shape. Pica is a disorder where the individual consume non-nutritive substance such as clay, soil, chalk, plaster, plastic, metal, and paper, etc. So in this pica, it may occur in childhood, adolescent, or adulthood, or even the most common onset is during the childhood. And then it is not diagnosed in children who are under the age of 2, because during this stage, the children are this is a normal behavior during this development stage. So it is mostly diagnosed above 2 years. And it's also identified when medical problems such as intestinal obstruction, intestinal infection, or poisonous arise. And it can also be seen in with children and adolescents who have autism spectrum and intellectual disability, but it can also occur during the normal developing children. Rumination regurgitation disorder. This is characterized by intentional and repeated bringing up of previously swallowed food back to the mouth, that is regurgitation, and the food may be re-chewed or re-swallowed, that is the rumination, or it can be maybe deliberately spat out, but not as in vomiting or any kind of self-induced or purging behavior. So in rumination, the disorder is diagnosed above 2 years, and then it is not attributed or it is not related to any gastrointestinal symptoms or any other medical conditions. The prevalence of eating disorder in India. So eating disorder in India was appeared in the mid-90s in cases of young single women. So they had symptoms of vomiting, amenorrhea. They also refused to eat, and also there was a significant weight loss and some other complaints. It was also done. The study was done in India on medical students, where obesity was found to be one of the highest risk factor, with stress being one of the most major factor. And the annual mortality rate of 1 million people from eating disorder in India has increased by 67.5% since 90s, and an average of 2.9% a year. So some experts believe that people in India suffer, individuals in India that suffer from eating disorder could be reasonably high, but then the studies or the case are not studied properly, and then so many people who are suffering from eating disorder could be suffering in silence. So to conclude, this eating disorder, due to rapid social and cultural changes, this eating disorder are becoming a very big concern in India. So in order to deal with this public health concern, it is very important to study the frequency of eating disorder and also to develop the specific mode of treatment. These are the reference, and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? First presenter, who was the moderator for the presentation?
So Dr. Vani.
Dr. Vani. Okay. And any questions from the audience? Dr. Sanjeevani, your comments on the presentation? Let us have faculty comments. Dr. Srinivasan, your comments on the presentation?
Yes, sir. First presenter presented very well and go through every area in the alcohol dependent syndrome, as well as he mentioned every management aspects. Second presenter also slightly presented well. Congratulations to both of you in your future. Wherever you go, you will learn more. Thank you.
So I think the sessions have been moderated well. I think presenters, both of you have done a very good presentation. Your confidence was scale high, spoke well, and the PowerPoints were crisply made. I think this is a starting of your journey. You have a lot of potential. You can you'll continue to learn more and would learn to modify the presentation. Presenting psychiatric topics are not easy for interns, but I think you have done very well. So congratulations and all the best for your future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.